Okay, rulers, settle down. Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to get singles for all your Force of Will and other trading card games, as well as these amazing patrons. Special thanks to guest lecturer member Vite Ramen. Thank you for your support. Class is in session. Hey there, rulers, DMO73 here, bringing you another feature match for the week, this time between Paul on a Swifty Grusbalesta list and me taking Dolly into a new package with Valentina. But again, just remember that you can get pre-orders right now with Odyssey Games for the 7th. Link is in the description. Let's jump right in. We're using Dolly a little bit differently this time. Valentina has access to some, being blue-black, some different strangers. We could go for the Chronos loop, but that doesn't really fit in with what kind of Valentina sets herself up for. So we more tried to get quick cast strangers as much as possible to go along with the fact that we have the ability to quick cast in our Regalia. And Paul's list with Swifty Grusbalesta is making use of Grus along with the will production from Milest to be able to quickly get to 5 unique stones and then swing with a 17/17 swiftness Grusbalesta. So that's kind of what we have going in here. Obviously, we're rolling to see who goes first. This is certainly kind of a control versus aggro kind of matchup, although the early turns for Grusbalesta are going to look a little bit familiar with what we saw last week, just because, again, it is this idea of the package that gets us the most unique stones the quickest, which is things like Rhea and Sigurd and Institute. It also helps to make my list a lot bigger if you have Institute too, which makes his board wipe a little bit more devastating. So with that, let's go ahead and go in here. First turn, we have an Ataroctia's Memoria, and then just a simple pass. There's not really much of a reason to go too aggressive at the start here, especially since, again, we're trying to set up for being able to play Regalia right away. Grusbalesta here has that one floating red, hits a Heaven's Rift. Seeing if he has anything to be able to make use of that floating red. Unfortunately, this build doesn't always, unless it hits that green stone for it first. Truth be told, Paul chose not to use the grabbing any stone he wants, which is something you need to remember here when you're using Grusbalesta, is your first stone can always be 6-stage stone because of the fact that Grus lets you grab whatever you want. Ultimately, though, because of that little misplay, it does seem like Paul is just going to go ahead and pass the turn. So, unfortunately, we lose the red will there, but we're still not in terrible shape because we still have 2 will going into my turn. Next up, we're going to see a play that looks very familiar from last week. We're going to go ahead and use Dolly, in this case, to produce blue, and then immediately play a Yggdrasil to be able to get us a Lover's Lock. This is really nice because we didn't have to worry about not using the randomization of Dolly because we're going to quick cast in that Regalia during Paul's turn, so we have the ability to make it non-random during his turn. In comes the Mikage Rhea here to send a card to graveyard, most likely going to be Sigurd here to set up for the Institute plays to get us those stones. As well as being able to make Rhea bigger right off the bat, which is pretty solid. He did ping us for 2 there out of the beginning, so, or at least I think he maybe did. It's the smart thing to do if I missed it on the live tracking. Does hit that 6-stage stone second, goes ahead and swings in for 4, which I think is the smart call here. There's no real reason to not at least swing in to kind of see if what he can bait out from my play line potentially. So we flash in the Lover's Lock here, and this is a little bit of a weird sequencing here. It's just something to keep in mind. Paul starts to let that Lover's Lock resolve to the point of starting to let me look at my strangers, and then he suddenly slams down the his last lecture. He's letting me do something, and then he's like, oh wait a minute, actually, you know what, let's go ahead and do the his last lecture here. Keep in mind that in the tournament, we're playing casually and for the sake of a feature match playing it out, keep in mind that in the course of a tournament, as soon as I start picking up the stranger deck, the timing window has passed. That Lover's Lock is resolved. So just some things to kind of keep in mind there. So he's going to his last lecture to put the Lover's Lock back in my hand. So then the Rhea swing gets to come through. I don't get any strangers. And then I'm going to take that 4. Go down to 36 and him up to 44. Wolster gets RFG'd. Then we get the 2 counters on Grusbalesta and Milest. At that point in time, choosing to pass. Now, losing Lover's Lock for Valentina is not a huge deal, especially because, once again, we're going to be able to cast it during his turn. It's not so much of a momentum stealer as it is when you're playing a regular Regalia ruler, because they're spending will on their turn to stop you from doing something, and then you can just go to your turn and get the will back. Down comes Asuya to get rid of the Rhea. Dolly's going to take him back down to 4,000. We're going to take another 2 here, go down to 34. Oh, I just missed it on the life tracker there. And then still before recovery, we're also going to go ahead and do Assault from the Demonic World to kill... Oh, he's going to try to kill the Yggdrasil here. In response, we're going to go ahead and try to produce the will to go ahead and do Lover's Lock. This will get us the non-random stranger, and we can actually save the Yggdrasil by bouncing it back to our hand. This is great because it's going to steal some momentum from Paul, as well as being able to get us another Lover's Lock to be able to use on the following turn. In terms of what stranger we grabbed, I'm pretty sure we grabbed a blue wizard. This is particularly because we want to be able to deal with the Sigurd. If he does before he does anything. Before recovery, we're going to use Grusbalesta to sack a stone. Gets us into a Gusting Skies, and then moving to recovery. This is pretty good because the Called Stone likely is going to get us another unique stone, because I believe Paul is playing a very diverse suite of stones here. And remember that the turn a stone comes into play from Calling Stone, not from Grusbalesta's ability. That stone can produce any color. So he's really not... Like, any stone is essentially 6-stage stone in terms of color production the turn that it comes into play. Paul trying to decide what to do here, ultimately decides to just pass the turn, which feels fine for us. We have a lot of will open, we have a lot of cards in hand, we're at a really good point to be able to potentially start making some plays. Before recovery here, we're going to go ahead and do Bewildering Charm. It's just to cycle a card. It is a mage art, so we can use the Lover's Lock to be able to pay for it, which is nice. 6-stage stone here to be able to play Valentina. We're not judgmenting Valentina terribly too often. It's particularly matchup dependent to be able to use her God's Art to rip stuff out of their hand. But then we can use Dark Alice's Smile, which is a wonderful little mage art in this scenario, once again being able to be cast off the Lover's Lock to try to discard his hand. This puts us in a position where if he does have another cancel in hand, we're in a pretty good shape, because we were probably going to grab the cancel anyway, and at this point we grab a really good hit in the number 13. He's going to cancel, but that costs him 2. We paid 1 will, and he paid 2. He lost a card, and we were going to discard a card anyway, so we're up a will, and now we can go ahead and do Curse of Dark Ragnarok from the hand, because we control Asuya, so we can rip another card out of his hand. We do grab the... We start to grab the Wellser and then go, wait a minute, actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and grab the Lilius Petal here, get that out of the way, because then what we're going to do is try to use the Curse of Ragnarok again from the graveyard. I don't know if we use it quite right away. Pardon my terrible stone sequencing. We are going to go ahead and cast the Curse of Ragnarok again here. At this point in time, we're going to grab the Wellser. This sets us up to being able to play a Lycaon. Yes, that's right. We are playing Lycaon in this spell-heavy package. Just to be able to apply pressure with discard while also leaving up defense. And then being able to go grab that other Yggdrasil with the... or that other... Lover's Lock, and having the will to be able to use it on his turn because of the 1 stone and the 1 Yggdrasil. So overall, putting us in a position where we feel pretty comfortable. We still have to recognize that our creatures are pretty small, but we have a lot of them. And we have ways to be able to potentially play through something like a Milest flip purely because of the fact that we have so many cards in hand. Choosing to play that Sigurd, not having a stranger to be able to grab at the time, so I guess we did not grab the blue wizard like I thought we did. Grabbing a Magic Stone Research Institute. This is going to set him up to be able to get another stone, probably losing the 6 Sages stone here to be, because he knows he has more copies of that to make a higher chance of having more diverse stones. So he's got 4 unique here at this point. So still 2 Windstone Shot and an Unknown at this point in his hand, because we don't know what that card he drew for turn was. We are going to go ahead and cast a Twin Swords here at the very end of his turn, once he moves to the end phase, to put that Sigurd on top of his deck and say, you know what, that's the next card you're going to be able to draw, which is a terrible card to have in your hand because you can't cast it from there. So we want to try to limit his options as much as possible to give ourselves the best chance to push through. For recovery, we're going to go ahead and get that Lycion to cast a Melfi, produce a little bit of extra will, and draw a card. Although we did this a little poorly, we didn't need to use the Lycion in recovery. Like, we could use the Lycion and then recover and go in and cast the Melfi during my recovery phase so that I don't have to be preemptive with this Lover's Lock. Ultimately, though, I am going to go ahead and use the Melfi Will for a Lover's Lock to be able to Judgment for 0 and get a Stranger non-randomly. This is because Valentina, when Judgmented, is going to get us a stone into play anyway, so this is just progressive value, and it's potentially setting us up for being able to God's Art into something that's relevant. Swinging in for some damage here. Grand total of should be 15. The Suya on board has 1+1/+1 counter on it. It's just not indicated on screen because it made him banish a Rhea. Get that 6 Sages stone. Using coin and 2, let's go ahead and Judgment out that Milest. So Milest is going to get a buff from the Academy, and it's already got 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So a minimum attack already of 1200, plus 300 for every card in his hand. So gonna wipe the board because unfortunately Valentina doesn't have any way to be able to reduce the attack of J Rulers. Ultimately, though, we feel pretty comfortable about that because we are about to get another Stranger off of the God's Art of Valentina. So I'm not sure exactly what's in the deck because I haven't played against it before. So we're going to go ahead and God's Art hit our own Melfi just to see if there's potentially that Melfi draw power engine in Paul's deck. Ultimately not, so we don't hit anything there, but Melfi was going to die anyway. And we get a Stranger at non-random, which is great because we can grab, you'll see here, the Antorite to be able to tap down his aggression here so I don't take a bunch of damage so it unblocks board. So Valentina, having done her job, we're going to go ahead and pay 4 to, as he moves into combat, flash in the Antorite. This is going to tap down his Milest, so it will not be able to swing this turn, provided it resolves. Ultimately, yes, it does. We have that turn of safety, as well as 1100 damage to throw at his face. Paul debating here whether or not he wants to go ahead and try to Judgment. Choosing no. I'm gonna go ahead and Space-Time Anomaly one time to draw a card and reduce the defense there. Thanks to Lycion, it also turns into some draw power. Doesn't kill because he's still got that huge bonus, but it is applying that -5/-5, which is very relevant. Producing some will, calling a stone, not getting punished. Swinging in for 11 to take him down to 14. We do see a Windstone shot here to try to get another stone. Because Windstone shot here, it's kind of a weird time to Windstone shot. there's nothing really that's going to be gained, and the mode to try to shoot isn't really going to do much because it's 1100 defense on an Anserite, and it only does 1000 with Windstone Shot. Take him down to 14. Gonna go ahead and do another space-time anomaly here. Draw another card, thanks to Lycion, to apply that -5, -5. And then ultimately, we're going to go ahead and play the Suya, since the only thing that he can banish is the Institute. He has to banish the Institute, which then will remove the buff from Milest, thus killing it, because he has a -10, -10 status effect on him. And he therefore is only a 9/9 with -10, -10, so he'll die. So getting rid of the Milest there, feeling pretty comfortable, putting up a blocker, putting ourselves in a pretty good position, way up on life, and a nice little chump blocker to deal with the good hand knowledge, and a nice little chump blocker to deal with this Swifty Grusbalesta that might be coming our way. Grusbalesta, though, still a threat, especially if my deck doesn't have, you know, if I run out of blockers, if I don't have a way to push through for that lethal, if I don't have a way to deal with the Eternal. Like, Grusbalesta at this point is, like, never going to die because of that permanent Eternal. And sure, without the buff, he's a little bit smaller, but he's still a 17, or at this point in time, a 19/19, which is very large. So swings in for 19 because he has swiftness, thanks to Milest. We're going to go ahead and flash in a Lover's Lock here. Not entirely sure what we're doing with this Lover's Lock. Unfortunately, Valentina's front side doesn't let you reduce the attack of a J Resonator. If it did, then obviously that would be the play here, to reduce Grusbalesta's attack to 0, make this kind of worthless, and then swing through on the crackback for lethal. Getting my random stranger here. And I believe returning my Anserite to the hand, which is a little bit weird. I don't know if there's necessarily a reason to do that, as opposed to the... yeah, I don't know if there was quite a reason to do that versus just grabbing the Suya back to hand. I mean, obviously we wanted the Suya. He's trying to do Windstone Shot, so he has to sacrifice a stone here to be able to shoot it. He can do 6 Stages Stone or Brad Stone, either one at this point, because Grusbalesta Flips is a 5-color stone. So that's going to go through, and we're going to take the 19 damage, go down to 15. And then at the end of the turn, we're going to use that Floating Will to flash in an Anserite, which Paul responds with a Necronomicon barrier, but there's not really a reason to do that, because Anserite's Answer effect is irrelevant at that point. Unfortunately, a little bit of a misplay. Gonna go ahead and cast the Curse of Ragnarok from the RFG. We're going to hit, we don't care about the Sigurd, so we're going to hit the Dark Spirit, leaving him with just a Sigurd in hand. So at this point in time, with a full grip of cards in hand, we feel pretty dang comfortable to go ahead and just swing in for 11, take him down to 3. Making the mistake of not at least floating some will before we called stone, because we don't hit 6 Sages Stone, and so now we do not have anything other than 3 Void Stones. We have the rest of our stones open, which is fine, but those 3 Void Stones might come back to bite us. This is the inherent risk of playing decks that have to go long, that aren't 6-stage rulers that are playing the 6-stage stone, is sometimes eventually they're just going to be stones that just produce void. Paul top decking something potentially to be able to serve as a blocker. We do have this Undine. Undine floating some additional will to bounce. I don't know why I target the Lycion, just to kind of maybe keep it safe in hand, but we are going to float some extra will and put at least the Lever's Lock back in hand. It does say up to 3, so there really wasn't a reason to target the Lycion, and then we're going to go ahead and try to block with the Undine. Which goes through. Comes that other stone for Paul. End of the turn, we're going to flash in that Lever's Lock. Once again, to randomly bounce the Anserite back to hand and get another Stranger, I think. Or I think we made Anserite's attack 0. Nope, we did. And then we just used the 2 floating from earlier and the new 2 to recast the Anserite. Really wasn't going to do much there. Regardless, it was just wasting of will. Attempt to swing in for lethal after recovering. Down comes the Pointy Hat Witch. Attempting to negate the damage from her for the turn. In response to the cast, we're going to go ahead and do Necronomicon Barrier. Moves to a block, says, nope, that's fine. That can't stop the prevention of the enter effect. We do have a Lever's Lock, though, to be able to then bounce the Pointy Hat out of the way. Anserite swings in for that last damage, and we move on to game 2. So in game 2 here, Paul choosing to take the draw. Choosing to take the play, giving Dolly the draw, which is a little bit strange, knowing the fact that this lets me be able to play the Dolly into Dolly into Yggdrasil turn 1. The thought is maybe we have some spot removal to deal with the heroic tree to kind of force me to waste a turn. Still seems a little bit weird. Not missing up this time to grab that first stone, being a 6-stage stone, and then recovering. And then we're going to have to kind of talk through something a little bit complex here, because it is not straightforward. We're going to try to do the Windstone Shot play line. So the way this works is you need to float will with the stone, then use Grusbalesta as activated effect to sack a stone to get a new stone, and then cast Windstone Shot. So the way this works is Windstone Shot, to be able to do that other mode, has to have a target engraved, so you have to have already sacked a stone. So he floats the green, sacks the stone to Grusbalesta, then uses the red and the green, the red from Milest and the green from the stone to cast Windstone Shot to get the stone back, effectively ramping. Now, there's really not a reason for Paul to do this during his own turn, because it just means that I get a free turn to do whatever I want. Being the fact that Windstone Shot is quick cast, there's kind of a reason, an argument to just kind of wait and see what happens, because you can do it regardless. Although for his deck, it is motivationally better to do it that way, because he has to make use of that red Milest will. This is typically why we've seen it in Grusbalesta feasting lists, because they have that void to also be able to produce during either player's turn. Once again, you're seeing this play line. We have to use Energize because we hit a black-green stone, but we do see Dolly into Yggdrasil, into Lever's Lock, and thankfully we can still cast it because of the black from Black Silence and then the blue from Yggdrasil. Into Paul's turn, pings me for the 2 damage, go down to 38. Grusbalesta still also before recovery going to sack that 6-stage stone, so once again he can try to increase his chances of hitting 5 uniques as fast as possible by decreasing the amount of duplicates in his deck. Gets another stone here, Bradstone. It is 5 colors at this point, but unfortunately doesn't have the second blade. Now there is potential word where you judgment the Milest there just to kind of go in and get really aggressive, especially if he's not worried about any kind of like big hate on Milest. But he does go ahead and play the Institute here. We also try to go ahead and do the cycling of the Lover's Lock. In comes the Welser. He's going to go ahead and hard cast the Welser so that it will remain on board. Still returns the spell to my hand. Hits another black Grainstone on my turn. So obviously now we have this very large Welser. It's a 12/12. We got 3 unique stones. So we just cast a 2-cost 12/12 that was also a cancel, which is pretty relevant. Being that he's tapped out and we want to get access to some kind of stranger, there's a thought to be able to play Lover's Lock during our turn, but there's also an argument to wait to just go ahead and do it during his turn. Ultimately saying, you know what, let's go ahead and do it with Lover's Lock. We make a misplay here of giving him the Welser back. There was no reason to do that. It just gives him a free cancel for later. We could have just reduced the Welser's attack to 0 for the turn. Just not the strongest play from me there. Taking another burn. I think the idea is because we planned on getting Blue Wizard, we could put the Welser back in his hand and cancel it later. So we'd rather not have to worry about also trying to answer an attacker during his turn, especially if he decides to do something like Judgment. Curse of Caduceus coming down, an unexpected play here to be able to prevent recovery of things. Not that my deck was doing that, as well as doing another slow burn. So this is Milest and Curse of Caduceus both applying some burn every single turn. Seeing that number 13 anti-magic in his hand, and he is at Steel 4. End of the turn, down comes Araya. We have no response to the cast of the Araya here. Oh, no, we are going to try to do something. So in response to the cast of the Ray, we're going to try to go ahead and flash in a Melfi here to produce a little bit of extra will, put a body on board. We're going to see that number 13 anti-magic come out to stop the Melfi, which is a very solid play. Being at Seal 4, it only costs him the 1 green now. So Melfi's going to get canceled. We're still waiting on the Raya play. And then what we see is actually Paul adding to the chase here. Deciding to do another Raya here, tapping out, and so that actually gives us an interesting opportunity here. We're going to produce double blue off of Lover's Lock. The problem is we're a little bit behind in this game because he had the Hard Guest Institute from hand. Like, these Rayas are very large. So what we're still going to do is flash in this Lover's Lock here to be able to, in like once both Rayas are on the board, in response, bounce one of the Rays back to his hand and then go get a stranger chosen at non-random. And this is an interesting situation of the fact that Paul is doing all of this during my turn. So we're in a pretty bad spot here because whatever we're doing is going to just let him have a free reign to do whatever he wants on his turn. After getting that stranger, we actually have 2 blue wizards, so we're going to cancel both Raya's effects to prevent him from sending a card to the grave. But again, this isn't super relevant because he already has the Institute on field. If the Institute wasn't there and he was going to try to send a Sigurd, then we're in a much better shape here to do the blue wizard double play here, because what it means is that he's not going to be able to get the Institute out, which then keeps us in a much safer position. Choosing to call stone with Milest hits the 5th unique stone with the 6th sage stone here. Looks at the board and says, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? He's got access to being able to judgment. He's got access to being able to judgment either of the rulers. Chooses to swing in with Araya, who's swinging in for 14. And we don't have a blocker on board, so that's just going to go through. Down to 22, up to 54. Big 2,800 point life swing just from a 1-drop because of that Institute. Ultimately, though, Paul's going to go ahead and follow it up by playing the Milest here with 3 cards in hand to be able to make it a 900 plus another 10, so 1900 damage to burn the board there. So definitely going to kill every single blocker, and then gets to push through for that 9, or that 19. I say that's fine, I can't do anything about it. We do try to do space time though to save ourselves a little bit of life, really only going down to 8, so taking 14 instead of 19. Draw for turn, establishing, looking at this board state, calling another stone. Unfortunately though, because of that institute, there's just a little bit more than we can try to apply pressure with. We do have the Duet of Darkness, we do have a space time, we do have all these things, but ultimately it's just not going to be enough, so we're going to go ahead and scoop it up and go into game 3. So in game 3 here, Dolly's choosing to take the draw again. Kind of the idea here is we want to set ourselves up to be able to put that pressure on him to have to tap out on that turn 1 if he wants to do the Windstone shot play, which gives us an opportunity to free play that first Regalia. Feel very comfortable there. And this is also another good opportunity to, once again, walk you through exactly how that play line works. So you produce green, sacrifice the stone with Grusbalesta before you cast the Windstone shot, because again, you can float will with a stone. This is me talking Paul through the play line at the beginning here, because it is not super straightforward. And so we sack the stone here, we've recovered it. Now we can use the red and the green to then produce, to cast the Windstone shot, thus bringing the stone back in. So we've essentially spent our first turn ramming to a second stone. Once again, we're going to see a very consistent first turn from the Dolly deck here, of Dolly into Yggdrasil to get Lover's Lock, to set up Lover's Lock for his turn, hoping this time around that he does not have the Welser for the beginning, or at least feels like he has to tap out. If he does try to tap out for an enter effect here, we're actually in a pretty interesting spot, or if he doesn't have the ability to play a Welser here, because if he tries to go for an enter effect, a greedy enter effect, we get Lover's Lock for Blue Wizard to cancel it. Ultimately though, he says pass, so we're not going to risk it, waste using our Energize if we don't have to, so we're just going to pass. We're just going to accept the pass and go to our turn. Choosing to pass once again, burns us for 2, takes us down to 38. Nothing during the upkeep, so no Raya from Paul here. Calling a stone, hit another 6 Sage Stone. Grusbalesta gonna do some more preemptive sacrificing here, floating some will to get to that 4th unique stone to play a golem. Now this is another example, a really nice chance to be able to talk about misplays. So in response to the cast of the golem, what we're actually going to try to do here is we're going to try to do Lover's Lock. This is to try to get the Blue Wizard to hand. This is misplay number 1. Misplay number 1 was trying to do it in response to the cast. What I should have done here is waited and do it in response to the effect. So then what I actually could have done is attempted to get the Stranger and also made its attack 0 for the turn. This would have been much better because then I have 2 fail-safes here, right? If he lets it resolve, I now have 2 pronged attack to make this golem not do anything. I get the Blue Wizard, which is comfortable here, and also, even if something happens to the Blue Wizard, I actually have reduced the golem's attack to 0 because of Valentina's trigger effect, and therefore I don't get my board wiped. By trying to go into before recovery here, we have the problem of now I'm trying to fight a cancel war, and I'm not a cancel deck. So we have this number 13 anti-magic come into play. In response, we're going to try to cast the Melfi. He says that's fine, that'll resolve. I get to draw a card, produce double blue. We're going to try to use a Viola. Viola's going to then try to get canceled with a Welser, and I don't have any follow-up for that. And now I'm going to get board wiped anyway, and I'm also, so like all of this stuff is I'm just going to lose all of this. I get Viola back to hand, sure, but I lose everything else. Now, Paul let that Lover's Lock resolve, and he might not have let it resolve if I had done it in response to the enter effect, because he might have tried to see the play line coming, but he also might have in the same way. I did myself a disservice by casting the Lover's Lock too soon, by not applying the most optimal play line for that Lover's Lock and making use of Valentina's enter effect to save my board, because now I'm snaring down a golem, which is a big problem. I do have a lot of bounce, I do have ways to get rid of it, but it's still a threat that I don't really want to be dealing with when I also know that there's a Milest and there's a Grusbalesta coming my way very, very quickly, followed shortly thereafter or beforehand with things like Rhea, Institute, all of that kind of pressure. We do see that Assault to kill the Yggdrasil, which is also a wonderful card. Take another burn damage, throw down to 36. In comes Golem, that preemptive attack, because there's no reason to not swing with it first here. He wants to try to get as much out of me as possible, and Golem by itself can just win games. Attempting to use a Bewildering Charm to put the Golem back in his hand, which feels terrible because it's a one-cost Golem, but it is at least one of our options right now. Have a black floating. And at this point, we're going to see Paul actually go for, we have 5 uniques. We're just going to say, you know what? Grusbalesta is all I need. I don't need the Institute. I don't need anything else. I've got a handful of quite a grip there. We're going to swing in for that damage. Take me down to, before we move into combat, attempting to try to do something here. Seeing about maybe flashing in a Lover's Lock and hoping to get an answer right, maybe, or some kind of quick cast blocker. Going down to 19. Should technically be 200 less. We're going to go ahead and try to cast Priscia's Big Show here. Now, if you're wondering why you're just seeing Priscia's Big Show now, it's just because I didn't see it in the other games. And ultimately, in this matchup, it really wasn't going to do much. That's because this deck is actually playing Valentina in the main board as well. The idea of being able to steal my opponent's entire board is very satisfying. And the other threat is to try to cast my own Priscia to then Godzard it to steal all of my opponents through an activate effect, as opposed to being able to resolve a battle comes to an end. Because unfortunately, battle comes to an end, not a mage art, so we don't have any way to make it cheaper. So 2 big shows cast so far, casting the third to get to a third big show, so that we can grab Valentina. This is also just to be able to grab any Resonator in our deck. Unfortunately though, or like another Priscia to set up a blocker wall, any kinds of stuff. Also nice to be able to set up that Lycion. As you see there, we have the ability to double cast, potentially double cast Space-Time Anomaly with access to both Lycion and the Lover's Lock. So we're feeling like we have some more time to spare. Still not feeling great though, staring down a lethal from a single swing of that Grusbalesta. And not a Resonator in sight to be able to play right now. Paul says, let's go. Let's try to go for the swing here. Down comes that pylon, like I said, to try to stall ourselves for some time with the space-time anomaly. Reduce the damage as much as possible. And here's where we made, unfortunately, a little bit of an error. If we had tried to flash in a blocker or something like that, we're still at a weird spot where like Milest can just Judgment here and kill us, and we don't really have much to be able to do with that. And again, his stones are all everything because of Grusbalesta's wonderful effect. That's exactly what Paul's going to do. He says, you know what? I'm just going to apply even more pressure and flip over Milest because you can do both. So this Milest swinging in for, based on the number of cards in his hand, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, has the 2 counters on it. So swinging in for 17, burning the board for 17, so significantly able to do lethal. The idea is, though, after we move into recovery, or after he moves into combat and has burned the board, we're going to try to flash in something. This is the idea of the Prisia train, to be able to potentially lock something down, keep ourselves safe, and at least survive for a turn, and then once he's gassed out, try to push back for lethal. The problem being he still has access to a golem, which is not great. So anything we try to establish is probably just going to get wiped. At that point, he pushes us back. He also has removal in hand, which is a little insane here. So we start to play the Prisia, and what we see happen here is he goes to cast his last lecture, which, so this is the last little interesting interaction here. His last lecture won't actually get him the Welser because he doesn't have a 6 Sage to recover, so the spell will literally do anything. He has the double there, but just keep in mind that his last lecture has to actually recover a ruler to be able to get that other mode in. So there you guys have it. That's the decks. Enjoy it, and until next time, class dismissed.